You've heard about concentration camps in Germany, Poland, Austria, but there's one you've probably never heard about, one that operated on Italian soil, one where a rice mill became a crematorium, one where the man in charge had just finished murdering 1.5 million Polish Jews and brought his death squad with him. Trieste, September 1943. The Nazis just occupied northern Italy and they're setting up something dark. Who runs it? Why does nobody ever pay for the crimes? What happens when Yugoslav Partisans and New Zealand soldiers race to liberate the city in May 1945? September 8th, 1943. Italy surrenders to the Allies. Within hours, German Wehrmacht forces roll into northern Italy. They carve out a zone called the Operational Zone of the Adriatic Littoral. OZAK, capital city. Trieste. The man appointed to run the SS and police apparatus arrives September 13th. His name is Odilo Globoknik, born in Trieste, April 21st, 1904. Slovenian father. Austro-Hungarian Empire. This man just wrapped up Operation Reinhardt in Poland. Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, Majdanek, 1.7 million Jews murdered under his command. Now he's coming home. With him, 92 specialists from Einsatzkommando Reinhardt, Ukrainian SS troops, male and female killers, Franz Stangl from Treblinka, Franz Reichleitner from Sobibor. Christian Wirth arrives days after the armistice. These are not occupation troops. These are architects of genocide. If you value documented World War II history and deep research into events that get buried, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. The script is researched and factual. Using sources from the Risiera di San Sabba National Monument Archives in Trieste, published trial proceedings from the 1976 Trieste Court of Assizes, documented in the archives of the Istituto Regionale per la Storia del Movimento di Liberazione nel Friuli Venezia Giulia, and research by historians Tulia Catalan and Matteo Perisinotto at the University of Trieste, published in the exhibition catalog 7 December 1943. Destination Lager opened December 7th, 2023. Now back to the information. October 1943. They need a camp. Globoknik picks a site in the San Sabba suburb. A rice mill, built between 1898 and 1913, 6 stories, vacant since 1934. The complex gets a new designation, Stalag 339. First use, temporary prison for Italian soldiers captured after the armistice. End of October, the function shifts. Now it's a Polizeihaftlager, police detention camp. 3 purposes. 1, hold Jews for deportation to Auschwitz. 2, torture and murder partisans, political prisoners, hostages. 3, store property stolen from victims. Christian Wirth commands the camp initially. He reports to Globoknik. Joseph Oberhauser serves as camp commandant under Wirth. Both men started in Action T4, the Nazi euthanasia program. 80,000 German and Austrian disabled people murdered between 1939 and 1941. Then they moved to Poland, Belzec, now Trieste. They need a crematorium. Erwin Lambert arrives, same architect who built gas chambers in Germany, Austria, Poland. He designs a cremation facility inside one of the mill buildings. April 1944, the oven starts operating. The only crematorium on Italian territory. 17 mini-cells get built inside the camp. Prison within a prison. Political prisoners. Resistance members. Jews. Civilians arrested in raids. Many spend only hours in the death cell before execution and cremation. Witnesses at the 1976 trial describe the method. SS troops play loud music at night. They release dogs. The screams need to be covered. Execution methods. Hanging. Firing squad gas. Bludgeoning. Most killings happen after dark. Ukrainian soldiers assist the SS. The bodies go to the crematorium. Bones and ashes. December 7th, 1943. First transport leaves Trieste. 157 Jews confirmed on this convoy. Destination? Auschwitz. The arrests started October 9th. Jews rounded up across the city, held at Coroneo prison, held at the Gestapo headquarters, Piazza Oberdan number 4. Under that building, bunker and torture cells. Screams audible from the street, according to eyewitnesses. From the Gestapo bunker, many go to San Sabba. From San Sabba to Trieste Central Station, loaded onto freight trains. Between December 1943 and February 1945, 1,177 Jews deported from Trieste, 1,080 murdered. 97 survived. The Risiera serves as transit camp for over 8,000 deportees from eastern provinces, Jews destined for Auschwitz, also detention, torture, and murder for anyone suspected of subversive activity. Italians, Slovenians, Croats, Hostages? Partisans? Anti-fascists? Anyone. The estimates are uncertain. During the 1976 trial, prosecutors hypothesized at least 2,000 victims killed at the Risiera itself. Some historians put the figure between 4,000 and 5,000, only 349 names confirmed. The SS and Ukrainians left minimal documentation. One Italian collaborator stands out, Mauro Grini, informer, responsible for revealing identities of approximately 300 Jews to Nazi authorities. His network of collaborators feeds the machine. The Bishop of Trieste, Antonio Santin, intervenes with Nazi authorities when he can. Sometimes he secures releases. Writer Gianni Stuprich and his family, arrested August 25, 1944, released after 7 days following Santin's intervention. More often, the intervention fails. Slovenian writer Boris Pahor, handed over to the Germans, deported to Dachau and other camps, finally liberated from Bergen-Belsen April 15, 1945. 600 others deported with him. May 26, 1944. Christian Wirth dies. Yugoslav partisans shoot him during a street battle in Opataija, buried with military honors at Opicina War Cemetery near Trieste, reburied at Kostermano in 1959. His replacement, Gottlieb Hering, former deputy at Belzec. August 1944. Dietrich Ahlers takes command. Ahlers born 1910. Lawyer, Nazi party member, SS officer, worked at the Führer's chancellery as a jurist. 1941, active in Berlin at Tiergartenstrasse. 4. Action T, 4 headquarters. Arrives Trieste spring 1944. Commander of Einsatzkommando Reinhardt for the region. The killing continues. The transports continue. Globoknik oversees everything from his office at Via Nizza 21, April 1945. Germany is collapsing. Yugoslav Partisan 4th Army and 9th Corps advance from the south. New Zealand's 2nd Division races from the west. They took Padua April 28th, crossed the Isonzo May 1st. Trieste is hours away. April 28th, San Sabba camp ceases operations. Waffen SS troops release remaining inmates. April 29th to 30th. The Nazis blow up the crematorium using explosives, destroy the chimney, burn documents, attempt to erase evidence. Globoknik flees April 30th. Dietrich Ahlers flees. The Gestapo headquarters at Piazza Oberdan evacuates. German troops and Chetnik irregulars retreat to the castle of San Giusto. They refuse to surrender to Yugoslavs, fear reprisals, fear executions. April 30th. Several thousand Italian anti-fascist volunteers from the Comitato di Liberazione Nazionale rise up against the Nazis. May 1st, 1945. Yugoslav partisan units enter Trieste, battle at Opicina on the outskirts. They take most of the city by evening. Globoknik gets command of a chaotic assortment of German and collaborationist troops, converging on Trieste. Immediately engaged by the partisans, the Germans at San Giusto still won't surrender. May 2nd, New Zealand's 2nd Division arrives. Lieutenant General Sir Bernard Freyberg accepts surrender of approximately 7,000 German soldiers at San Giusto Castle. They surrender only to the New Zealanders, not to the Yugoslavs. 13,000 Chetnik irregulars under Momkailo Dujic surrender to New Zealand forces. Fighting continues for days between Tito's army and remnant Wehrmacht units. May 3rd, remaining German pockets on the north side surrender. Villa Opicina pocket collapses. The city falls under joint occupation, New Zealanders and Yugoslav partisans. Tension immediately. Territorial dispute. Yugoslavia wants Trieste. Western allies want allied military government. The New Zealanders prevented Yugoslav annexation by arriving when they did, but the killers are gone. Globoknik retreats into Austrian Carinthia, hides high in the mountains near Weissensee. Alpine hut, traveling with his closest staff. May 31st, 1945, British armored cavalry unit from the 4th Queen's Own Hussars tracks him down. Moslicher Alm, 1,250-meter mountain in the Eastern Alps. 7 other wanted Nazis with him, captured. Same day, Globoknik bites cyanide capsule, dead before trial. Joseph Oberhauser escapes Italy, returns to Munich, works as sawmill laborer, arrested April 13th, 1948 in Soviet occupation zone. Convicted. September 24th, 1948 by Soviet military administration. Membership in criminal organization, killing victims at Grafeneck, Brandenburg, Bernburg, 15 years prison, 10 years deprivation of civil rights. Released April 28, 1956, after 8 years. Amnesty, lives in Munich, serves beer in a brewery, casual laborer, bartender, waiter, nobody touches him. Dietrich Ahlers, lives in Germany, free. Christian Wirth, already dead. Gottlieb Hering, died during investigation. Franz Stangl, Arrested in Brazil, 1967. Tried in Germany. Dies in prison, 1971. But most walk away. Decades pass. Silence. The Risiera becomes a refugee camp in the 1950s. Ethnic Italians fleeing Yugoslavia. April 15th, 1965. Italian President Giuseppe Saragat declares the Risiera di San Sabba a national monument. Quote, unique example of a Nazi lager in Italy. The phrase is careful. Other camps existed in Italy, Fossoli, Bolzano, Borgo San Dalmazzo, but none had a crematorium. The presence of the crematorium becomes the distinguishing feature. 1975, renovation into a museum. Architect Romano Boico supervises. February 16th, 1976. Trial begins. Court of Assizes in Trieste. 30 years after the crimes. Prosecutor, Claudio Coassin. Judge, Sergio Serbo. 30 lawyers represent victims, families, and the National Association for Deportations to Nazi Camps. 174 witnesses testify. Survivors of the Risiera, relatives of the dead. 5 historians, Enzo Calotti, Tony Ference, Mario Pacor, Galliano Foger, Teodoro Sala. Depositions from Einsatzkommando, Reinhardt members acquired from German judges, read in court. 2 men accused, August Dietrich Ahlers and Josef Oberhauser. Charge, continuous mass murder with aggravating circumstances. Unknown but large number of victims. The cage for the accused sits empty. Neither man can be extradited. Italian-German agreements allow extradition only for crimes committed after 1948. Ahlers dies March 1975 during the trial. Oberhauser continues serving beer in Munich. April 29, 1976. Sentence. Proceeding against Dietrich Ahlers declared null due to death. Joseph Oberhauser, convicted in absentia, life imprisonment, ergastolo, confirmed by Court of Appeal 1978. Never served. German authorities refused to hand him over. Bilateral agreement signed 1942 protects him. Oberhauser continues working at the brewery. Dies November the 22nd, 1979, age 64. Natural causes. Free man, no cell, no consequences. Journalist Albin Bubnic from Slovenian daily Primorski Dnevnik presents judges with partial list of 317 names of people killed at the Risiera. Today, 349 names confirmed. The real number remains unknown. Documents burned. Crematorium destroyed. Evidence scattered. If you're still watching, subscribe. We need support for this kind of deep research. Comment below which city you're from. Back to the story. The site today stands as memorial. Via Giovanni Palatucci, 5 Trieste. The main 6-story rice mill building houses the museum exhibition. Overhauled 2015 to 2016. Multimedia elements. Interactive screens. Film clips projected from ceiling into display boxes. Scale model showing the camp topography. None of the upper floors accessible. The central courtyard. Metal sculpture marks where the crematorium stood. Large metal plate on the ground. The outline visible. 2 buildings demolished. The machine room where killings took place. The boiler room that housed the crematorium. 17 mini cells preserved. The death cell remains as it was. Visitors walked the same passages. Prisoners walked. Read the names. See the artifacts. Glass urn with soil from Jerusalem. Objects pillaged from Jewish houses in Trieste. Donated early 2000s. Information panels in Italian, Slovenian, English. The Emptiness Speaks. Piazza Oberdan in the city center. The Gestapo headquarters. Number 4. Insurance building constructed for Ras Company in the 1930s. Gestapo occupied it during German occupation. Under the building, bunker walls still exist, where Father Placido Cortesi died, where Boris Pahor was tortured, where Slovenians, partisans, anti-fascists died. Small plaque barely visible. Trieste Central Station. Side entrance. Plaque states men, women, children deported between September 1943 and February 1945 to Nazi camps. Track underneath the station. Secret. Freight cars loaded there. The trains left from that hidden track, Piazza dell'Unità d'Italia, September 18, 1938. Benito Mussolini stood on a podium and announced Italian racial laws. 200,000 people gathered. September 2013. Commemorative plaque placed in the ground next to the Fountain of the Four Continents, the synagogue. During German occupation, storage for confiscated Jewish property, goods from shops and homes of deported families. After liberation, reopened, restored, still functions. The numbers tell the cold truth. Pre-war Jewish population of Trieste, approximately 6,000. One of the largest and richest Jewish communities in Italy. September 1943, German occupation begins. October 9th, Arrests start December 7th. First transport by end of January 1944. City emptied of Jews. 4 months. Community liquidated. Historian Liliana Picciotto-Farjan documents it. December 7th, 1943 to February 25th, 1945. 1,177 Jews deported from Trieste. 1,080 murdered. 97 survived. The percentage, 91.7% killed. Transport of September 2nd, 1944. 48 Italian Jews from Trieste to Auschwitz-Birkenau. 1 survived. Across all of Italy and Italian-occupied France and the Greek islands of Rhodes and Kos, 8,564 Jews deported, mostly to Auschwitz-Birkenau. 1,009 returned. In Italy proper, 196 Jews shot. Nearly half at the Ardeatine Caves, March 1944. The Risiera di San Sabba served 3 documented functions. 1. Elimination of hostages, partisans, political prisoners, Italians, Slovenians, Croats. 2. Sorting and deportation of political and racial detainees to other camps in the Reich. 3. Storage of property confiscated from Jewish communities of the Adriatic coast. Thousands of partisans and political prisoners murdered on site. Many thousands sent to concentration camps. Estimates range widely. 25,000 partisans and Jews interrogated and tortured between October 20th, 1943 and beginning of 1945, according to traces of war documentation citing camp records. Of those, 3,000 to 5,000 murdered. Methods documented in trial testimony: hanging, coyote firing squad, gas emissions, bludgeoning, loud music played to mask screams, dogs released, nighttime executions, Ukrainian soldiers under SS command carry out orders. The trial of 1976 remains the only major accounting. Case number 1, 082/70. Registry of the Office of Instruction of the Tribunal of Trieste. Judge Sergio Serbo instructs the proceeding. 2,125 pages of trial documents, organized in 13 files, 6 boxes. Detailed inventory exists at the Istituto Regionale per la Storia del Movimento di Liberazione nel Friuli Venezia Giulia. General Acts, Requisition, Sentence, Indictment Order, Examinations of Witnesses, Requests to Germany, Austria, Yugoslavia. February 16th to April 29th, 1976. 73 days, 174 witnesses. The prosecution presents mountains of evidence. Survivor testimony, historical analysis, depositions from Germany. The defense, silence. Oberhauser refuses comment on allegations. Statements made previously to investigators read to court. Colleagues implicate him. Camp construction, full gassing operations, close association with Wirth throughout Operation Reinhardt. Authoritative person in the killing process. The verdict, guilty. The sentence, never served. The geographical context matters. Trieste sits at the head of the Gulf of Trieste, narrow strip between Adriatic Sea and Slovenia. Slovenia, 8 kilometers east. Croatia, 30 kilometers south. Strategic location, major port. Historically contested, Austro-Hungarian Empire until World War I, Italian from 1918, Fascist Italy from 1922, Nazi occupation zone 1943 to 1945, then disputed territory. Free territory of Trieste, established February 10, 1947 by Treaty of Peace with Italy. Zone A administered by British and American forces. Zone B by Yugoslav Army. The Morgan Line divides it. Agreement signed Duino, June 10, 1945. Yugoslav troops withdraw June 12, 1945. United Nations Security Council Resolution 16. January 1947 calls for independent free state. Never happens. Territorial dispute lasts until October 5, 1954. London Memorandum. Zone A to Italy. Zone B to Yugoslavia. The Risiera sits in what becomes Italian territory. The broader Operation Reinhardt context cannot be separated. Globoknik sent final report to Heinrich Himmler, November 4, 1943, from Trieste. Operation Reinhardt concluded October 19th. All camps dissolved. Himmler's reply: gratitude and appreciation for great and unique services rendered to the entire German people. 1.7 million Jews murdered in those camps. Globoknik looted assets from Holocaust victims at death camps in occupied Poland, brought the wealth to Italy with him. His men took part in Action Tiergarten 4, the euthanasia program. They perfected industrial murder in Poland, then applied those techniques in Trieste. The Einsatzkommando Reinhardt divided into 3 geographical areas: R1 for Trieste, R2 for Udine, R, 3 for Fiume. Headquarters officially designated with the letter R. The operation in Italy, Sonderabteilung Einsatz R, Task Force Operation R. Same personnel, same methods. New location, Friedrich Reinhardt serves as Reich Defense Commissioner of OZAK. Nazi Gauleiter of Carinthia, Chief of Civil Administration. The province of Ljubljana gets Slovenian provincial administration. Bishop Grigori Rozman recommends Leon Rupnik as president. Notorious anti-Semite, collaborator. Globoknik commands all Nazi camps. Higher SS and police leader. Reports to Karl Wolff, HSSPF Italian. Wolff later negotiates Operation Sunrise, secret surrender talks in Switzerland, March 1945. Alan Dulles of OSS works with Wolff. Wolff rescued by Dulles and Swiss intelligence April 26, 1945, after Italian partisans capture him. Verbal agreement protects Wolff from Nuremberg prosecution, despite role in murder of 300,000 Jews. The command structure clear. The protection after war, selective. April 28, 1945, the camp stops. The crematorium blown up night of April 29th to 30th. Guards flee. Remaining prisoners released. What's left? Ruins, bones, ashes, testimonies. The New Zealanders arrive May 2nd. Find the site abandoned. Find the destroyed crematorium. Find survivors who talk. Find records partially destroyed. British and American forces take control. Yugoslav Partisans. Control areas east of Morgan Line. The investigation begins slowly. Bodies exhumed from mass graves. Evidence collected. Witnesses interviewed. But the killers scattered. Globoknik dead by suicide. Worth dead by partisan bullet. Others fled to Germany, Austria, South America. The Italian justice system moves slowly, very slowly. 30 years to trial. The legal complications multiply. Italian-German bilateral agreement of 1942. Extradition allowed only for crimes after 1948. Why? To facilitate post-war cooperation, to rebuild relationships. The agreement protects Nazi war criminals. German courts reluctant to prosecute. Soviet military administration in Germany convicts Oberhauser 1948. 15-year sentence. Released after 8 with amnesty. Returns to Munich. West German authorities aware. Do nothing. Italian authorities request extradition 1970s. Germany refuses. Legal technicality. Oberhauser lives openly, works openly, dies naturally. No punishment. The message, mass murder has no consequences if enough time passes. If the right agreements exist, if political will absent, the scale of impunity shocks. 92 members of Einsatz Commando Reinhardt brought to Trieste. How many prosecuted? 2 indicted in Italy. 1 dies before verdict. 1 convicted in absentia, never serves time. In Germany, minimal prosecutions. Joseph Oberhauser, 4.5 years for Belzec crimes. Convicted January 1965 in Munich. Charged with 450,000 counts of accessory to murder. Sentenced to 4.5 years. Already served 8 years in Soviet prison. Time credited. Released. The only person successfully convicted of Belzec crimes. 4.5 years for 450,000 murders. The mathematics obscene. Franz Stangl, arrested Brazil, 1967. Extradited to West Germany. Tried for Treblinka and Sobibor. Convicted. Life sentence. Dies in prison, 1971. One of the few. Christian Wirth, killed 1944. Gottlieb Herring, died before trial. Erwin Lambert, prosecuted for euthanasia crimes, served minimal time. The others, disappeared, protected, or ignored. Recent research continues uncovering details. December 7th, 2023. Exhibition opened at Risiera di San Sabba. 7 December, 1943. Destination Lager. Historians Matteo Perisinotto and Tulia Catalan from University of Trieste led research. They consulted EHRI Portal, European Holocaust Research Infrastructure, found archival material in archives of the Republic of Slovenia, documents from Slovenian post-war internal affairs authorities, pieced together the first convoy, December 7th, 1943. For 80 years, the exact names unknown. Now 157 Jews confirmed on first transport. The descendants finally know. Families donated photos and memories. The exhibition drew 80,000 visitors, school children, local residents, tourists, learning about Trieste's darkest chapter. The research continues. More material likely exists in archives across Slovenia and Serbia, not yet available through EHRI portal. The story still emerging. Approximately 80 years later, questions remain. How many total victims at Risiera? Court said at least 2,000. Some say 5,000. Only 349 names confirmed. How many transited through on way to other camps? Over 8,000 documented. Likely more. How many Ukrainians participated? Documents say group of Ukrainian collaborators. Exact number unclear. How many Italian collaborators? Mauro Grini and network responsible for 300 arrests. Others unnamed. How many escaped justice? 92 Einsatzkommando members brought to Trieste. 2 indicted, 1 convicted, never served. That's 91 who walked away. The percentage, 98.9% impunity. The math brutal. The silence after war nearly total. The morgue ledger from Coroneo prison survives. Archived at State Archives of Trieste. Lists prisoners who died in custody. Lists those transferred. To where? San Sabba. To Gestapo headquarters. Piazza Oberdan. The paper trail thin but present. The Sicherheitspolizei archives. Names of people arrested and imprisoned first months of occupation. The CDAC database in Milan. Central Documentation Center on Jewish Contemporary History. Cross-referenced with Arelson Archives. International Center on Nazi Persecution. The sources exist, scattered across multiple countries, multiple languages, multiple archives. Historians slowly reconstructing. Each name recovered a victory against erasure. Each document found a piece of truth salvaged. The physical evidence limited. Crematorium destroyed. Buildings demolished. The outline remains. Metal marks the spot. The 17 mini-cells intact. The death cell preserved. The courtyard empty. What stood there? Machine room. Boiler room. Crematorium. Chimney. Now, air and memory. The absence speaks louder than presence could. Romano Boyko's 1975 renovation respected this. No reconstruction. No false restoration. Just marking. Just preservation. Just silence. The metal sculpture in courtyard. The plate on ground. The empty space. This is where they burned the bodies. This is where the chimney stood. This is what they tried to hide. The architecture of absence. The geopolitical aftermath shaped everything. Cold War begins before World War II ends. Trieste becomes flashpoint. Italy wants it. Yugoslavia wants it. Western allies need it as buffer. Soviet Union backs Yugoslavia. 9-year dispute. Free territory established, but never truly functions. Military occupation. Ethnic tensions. Italian speakers versus Slovene speakers. Foibe massacres by Yugoslav forces. Thousands of Italians killed, thrown in karst sinkholes. Exodus of 200,000 to 350,000 Italians from Istria and Dalmatia. Both sides have victims. Both sides have crimes. The Risiera sits in middle of this. The memory contested. Whose suffering counts, whose narrative prevails. Italian fascist crimes. Nazi crimes. Yugoslav partisan crimes. The layers of violence overlap. The memorial landscape complicated. The 1976 trial happens during this context. Italy still processing fascist past. Still debating collaboration. Still reluctant to confront. Germany paying reparations, but protecting war criminals through legal technicalities. Yugoslavia holding war crimes, trials but focused on own narrative. The Trieste trial anomaly. Rare moment of reckoning. Rare attempt at justice. Result? Conviction without consequences. Sentence without imprisonment. Verdict without enforcement. The performance of justice without justice. The trial matters anyway. The testimony matters. The 174 witnesses matter. Their words on record. Their experiences documented. The historical record established. Even if Oberhauser never serves time, the crimes officially recognized, officially condemned. The precedent set, even if imperfectly executed. 80 years later, the questions persist. Why did nobody pay? Because agreements signed to facilitate Cold War alliances. Because political will absent. Because witnesses dead or silenced. Because perpetrators scattered and protected. Because West Germany needed stability, not trials. Because Italy wanted to move on. Because the machinery of impunity well-oiled. The same pattern across Europe. Klaus Barbie, safe in Bolivia until 1980s. Adolf Eichmann, safe in Argentina until Mossad, 1960. Joseph Mengele dies in Brazil, 1979. Never caught. Hundreds of others. Thousands. Operation Paperclip brings Nazi scientists to America. Operation Bloodstone recruits collaborators. Ratlines smuggle war criminals to South America. Vatican assists. Allied intelligence assists. The escape routes function efficiently. The justice system functions slowly, selectively, symbolically. The Risiera today stands as warning, as memorial, as proof. The only Nazi extermination camp on Italian soil. The only one with crematorium. The designation matters. The specificity matters. Not just a transit camp, not just a detention center, an extermination facility. Purpose, built to kill and cremate. The industrial murder perfected in Poland, applied in Italy. The techniques portable. The personnel interchangeable. The victims, whoever resisted, whoever was Jewish, whoever was caught. The lesson, genocide travels, The infrastructure small. A rice mill, 90 men, one crematorium, enough to kill thousands, enough to terrorize a region, enough to liquidate a community in 4 months. The archives hold one more document. Soil core sample taken from the courtyard. Published findings show heat patterns in ground, consistent with sustained high temperature burning. Chemical analysis shows residue, organic compounds, bone fragments. The earth itself bears witness. The science confirms what survivors testified, what the destroyed crematorium proves by its destruction. They burned the dead here, constantly, for months. The temperature reached 1,000 degrees Celsius. The ash mixed with earth, the bones ground to powder, but particles remain. Molecular traces. The ground remembers what the Nazis tried to erase. The final truth sits in the numbers. 1,177 Jews deported from Trieste. 91.7% murdered. 3,000 to 5,000 killed at Risiera itself. 8,000 transited through to other camps. 174 witnesses testified. 2 men indicted. 1 convicted. 0 imprisoned. 91 Einsatzkommando commando members never charged. 80 years passed. 349 names confirmed of thousands killed. The arithmetic of erasure. The mathematics of impunity. The cold calculation that justice deferred is justice denied. And the discovery that landed in April 2025 in the National Archives of Slovenia changes the frame. The boundary marker, found where the warning post once stood. The marker shows the exact perimeter of the OZAK zone, the exact boundary of Globoknik's domain, the exact limit of his killing ground, the stone marker excavated from overgrown field, the inscription weathered but readable, Operationszone Adriatic literal, the physical proof of the administrative machinery of genocide. This is where it started. This is where it ended. This is the line they drew. The killers are all dead now. Globoknik, cyanide, May 31st, 1945, Worth, partisan bullets. May 26th, 1944. Oberhauser, natural causes, November 22nd, 1979. Aller, natural causes, March 1975. But the line remains, the boundary marker remains, the Risiera remains, the 17 cells remain. The absence in the courtyard remains. The names of 349 confirmed victims remain. The testimony of 174 witnesses remains. The soil core showing burn patterns remains. The archives in 3 countries remain. The memory fights erasure. The evidence survived the explosion. The truth outlasted the silence. Rice mill to crematorium, 92 men, 19 months, thousands dead, 2 indicted, 0 jailed. That's the bloody end of the Gestapo in Trieste. The cyanide capsule crushed between Odilo Globoknik's teeth on May 31st, 1945, was not an end. It was an escape, a final, self-serving act that cheated a hangman's noose and prefigured a broader flight from justice that would define the legacy of the Risiera di San Sabba. The architects of this Italian death factory were gone, dead, scattered, or hiding in plain sight. But their crimes did not vanish with the smoke from the dynamited crematorium. They seeped into the soil of Trieste, into the city's memory, creating a toxic silence that would last for decades. The story did not end when the New Zealanders arrived. It fractured into 1,000 other stories of collaborators who walked free, of a city that chose to forget, and of the slow, agonizing fight to make the ghosts of a rice mill speak. This is the story of what happens after the war is won. When the pursuit of justice clashes with the politics of the New World Order, when a city, brutalized by years of conflict, must decide which of its many wounds to tend to and which to let fester. While Globoknik's senior SS commanders evaded their reckoning, the machinery of murder at the Risiera had relied on more than just 92 German specialists. It needed local help. It needed informers, enforcers, and willing participants. Their fates paint a more complicated, and perhaps more damning, picture of post-war justice. Consider the case of Mauro Grini. He was not an SS officer. He was an Italian from Trieste, a meticulous informer who, for money and ideology, fed the Gestapo a steady stream of names. At least 300 Jews and partisans were arrested because of him. His network was the nervous system of the Nazi occupation, translating local knowledge into lists for deportation and execution. After the liberation, Grini was caught. Unlike the Germans, he could not claim protection under complex international agreements. He was tried by an Italian court. The evidence was overwhelming. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But post-war Italy was a nation desperate for reconciliation, even at the cost of memory. In 1946, the Togliatti amnesty was passed, a sweeping act of clemency designed to heal the wounds of civil war between fascists and partisans. Grini's sentence, like those of thousands of other fascist collaborators, was drastically reduced. He was released after serving only a few years. He walked out of prison a free man, his debt for 300 lives paid with a handful of years. Then there were the Ukrainian guards, the Wachmänner, often recruited from Soviet prisoner of war camps. They were given a stark choice by the SS, collaborate or starve. At the Risiera, they were the ones who drove the prisoners, who played the loud music to drown the screams, who did much of the hands-on killing under SS orders. After the war, they became ghosts. Some were captured by the advancing Soviet Red Army and were summarily executed or dispatched to the Gulag. Their crimes in Italy forgotten in the face of their larger crime of treason against the Soviet Union. Others melted into the vast river of displaced persons flooding post-war Europe. They shed their uniforms, changed their names, and lined up for passage to Canada, Australia, or the United States, burying their pasts under new identities. For decades, Allied immigration officials, more concerned with rooting out communists than finding low-level Nazi collaborators, asked few questions. The hunt for men like John Demjanjuk decades later would reveal the scale of this failure. But for the men who ran the Risiera's death cell, their escape was total. And what of the Chetniks? The 13,000 Serbian royalist irregulars under the command of Momčilo Đuđić, who had collaborated with the Germans against Tito's partisans. As the Reich collapsed, they retreated with the Germans to Trieste, only to surrender en masse to the newly arrived New Zealanders on May 2nd. It was a calculated move. Surrendering to the British Commonwealth forces saved them from the summary executions they would have undoubtedly faced at the hands of the Yugoslav Partisans. They were disarmed and placed in Allied camps in Italy. Despite Yugoslav demands for their extradition on charges of war crimes, the Cold War was dawning. These fiercely anti-communist fighters were seen by some in Allied intelligence as a potential asset. Most were eventually allowed to emigrate. Momčilo Đuđić, the Krst, the Bloody Priest, settled in California, becoming a prominent figure in the Serbian diaspora community. He died peacefully in San Diego in 1999, having never faced a court for his alleged crimes. His 13,000 men scattered across the Western world. Their role in the brutal Balkan theater of the war, and their final days alongside the Nazis in Trieste, conveniently forgotten. The silence from the courtroom was matched by a silence in the streets of Trieste. For 20 years after the war, the Risiera di San Sabba was not a memorial. It was not a site of pilgrimage. It was a refugee camp. In a bitter twist of history, the buildings that once held Jews and partisans for deportation were now filled with ethnic Italians fleeing Istria and Dalmatia, territories ceded to Yugoslavia. These refugees, the Asuli, brought with them their own stories of horror, of summary executions by Tito's partisans, of bodies thrown into the deep karst sinkholes known as Foibe. This created a brutal conflict of memory. For a significant portion of Trieste's population, the primary post-war trauma was not the Risiera, but the Foibe and the loss of Italian lands. The narrative of Italian victimhood at the hands of Slavic communists overshadowed the narrative of Italian collaboration with the Nazis. The city, now a tense frontier outpost of the West, perched on the edge of the Iron Curtain, had little appetite for examining its own fascist past. The crimes of the Risiera were seen by some as a foreign import, a German affair on Italian soil, disconnected from the city's own history. The local collaborators, the fascist officials, the silent bystanders, their stories were buried under the political expediency of the Cold War. To confront the Risiera was to confront uncomfortable truths about Mussolini's racial laws, announced in this very city in 1938, and the fascist regime that laid the groundwork for the Nazi occupation. It took a new generation, one that came of age after the war, to break the silence. Historians and former partisans began the painstaking work of collecting testimony and demanding recognition. Finally, on April 15th, 1965, 20 years after its liberation, the Risiera was declared a national monument by Italian President Giuseppe Saragat. The designation was careful, calling it the unique example of a Nazi lager in Italy, a phrasing that focused on the German-built crematorium and subtly distanced it from Italy's own network of fascist camps. Yet, it was a start. The declaration paved the way for the trial 11 years later. The 1976 trial, for all its legal impotence, was a cultural earthquake. For 73 days, the city's newspapers were filled with eyewitness accounts of torture, of nightly executions, of the smell from the chimney. The testimony of 174 witnesses forced Trieste to look at the abyss that had opened in its suburbs. The empty cage in the courtroom, where Allers and Oberhauser should have sat, became a symbol not just of their impunity, but of a justice system and a collective memory that had failed. To visit the Risiera di San Sabba today is to visit a landscape of intentional emptiness. When the architect Romano Boico was tasked with transforming the site into a memorial in 1975, he made a radical choice. He did not rebuild the destroyed crematorium or the killing house. To reconstruct would be to falsify, to create a sterile replica of an atrocity. Instead, he used the language of absence. The entrance leads into a vast concrete courtyard, where the 6-story rice mill building once stood. Only the ground floor remains, housing the museum. Where the killing rooms and the crematorium chimney were dynamited, there is now open space. Giant concrete walls enclose the area, dwarfing the visitor and blocking out the surrounding city, creating a claustrophobic, sacred silence. A large, stark metal sculpture traces the path the victims took from the cells to their deaths. On the ground, a massive steel plate outlines the footprint of the destroyed crematorium building. You stand on the ghost of the structure. You are forced to imagine what is gone. The preserved buildings are left raw and scarred. The 17 small holding cells, each designed for a handful of prisoners but often packed with dozens, are bare concrete boxes. The death cell, where prisoners spent their final hours, remains untouched. Its walls covered in desperate graffiti carved by the condemned. Walking through these spaces is a visceral experience. The chill of the concrete, the oppressive narrowness of the corridors, the profound sense of suffering that clings to the walls, the museum itself. Updated between 2015 and 2016, uses modern technology to tell the story. Film clips are projected onto displays. Survivor testimonies play on loops, but the power of the site lies in what Boico preserved, the authentic, brutal fabric of the camp. It is a memorial that refuses to provide comfort. Its brutalist architecture reflects the industrial, bureaucratic nature of the killing. It is a machine made of concrete and steel, and its purpose was the disassembly of human beings. By focusing on the absence of the key killing structures, the memorial forces a question upon every visitor. How could this happen here, and how could it be so thoroughly erased? The memorial's trilingual signage in Italian, Slovenian, and English is a quiet but profound acknowledgement of the complex history of this borderland. It recognizes that the victims were Italians, Slovenes, Croats, and Jews, a mosaic of peoples targeted by a singular, monolithic ideology of hate. It is a conscious attempt to heal the ethnic divisions that were so expertly exploited by the Fascists and Nazis, and which fueled the memory war for so long. 80 years have passed. The questions remain etched into the concrete walls of the Risiera. The exact number of dead may never be known, buried under burned documents and the ashes scattered from the crematorium. The full roster of killers, from the SS officers down to the last guard, will never be complete. But the memorial stands as a bulwark against the final erasure the Nazis attempted with their dynamite on that April night in 1945. It ensures that the silence is no longer one of forgetting, but one of solemn, heavy remembrance. The rice mill of San Sabba no longer processes grain. It processes history, grinding the raw, painful truth of what happened here, ensuring that we, the living, are forced to bear its weight.